All right, everyone. Hello and welcome into our first official game preview for the 2021 regular season. As tomorrow, less than 24 hours away, the Minnesota Vikings will kick things off officially against the Cincinnati Bengals on the road in Cincinnati. It's finally here, thank God. So today we're going to take a look at the tale of the tape between these two teams, a little bit of a review from last season, how the offseason has gone for both of these teams, how they match up, some headlines, some storylines, and the overall series between these franchises, which is actually not a very big history. They've only met, I believe, 13 times total over the course of the existence of these two franchises. So a lot to look forward to. Before we begin this video, I just want to give a quick shout out to the Minnesota Golden Gophers for winning their first game of the season today against Miami, Ohio. Did they have to make it that interesting is my question, because in the second half they came out looking rather flat, and believe it or not, they did not complete a pass in the second half, still managed to win a football game. There was a little bit of showboating by some of the Red Hawk players there where they were, making fun of the row the boat celebration, which I was like, okay, scoreboard. But either way, I think we should have handled our business a little bit better against a MAC team, but MAC school seems to be giving everybody the yips today, with Toledo going toe-to-toe with Notre Dame. But it feels good to see Potts take over for Mohamed Ibrahim, who has been lost for the season, so the running game should still be solid for the Golden Gophers. Let's hope that we just don't get slaughtered by Colorado next week, who seems to be holding their own against number 5 Texas A&M today. So that's our little nugget of college football. Before we begin, let's turn to the NFL for the professional action. Talk about the Minnesota Vikings versus the Cincinnati Bengals, which is taking place tomorrow. So for the first game of the season, we're going to take a look at the rankings from 2020. And the only reason we're doing this is because it's the first week of the season. We don't really know too much about these teams in terms of statistical categories. So the best we can do is take the numbers from last year, go over the off-season changes, and then try to build a better picture of what we can expect tomorrow. So these are the numbers from 2020. As we go along and do more previews, which we hope to do every Saturday here on this channel, so subscribe if you haven't done that. We're going to, of course, these numbers are going to change in the future. So like next week, we'll be talking about where they rank in terms of 2021 statistics and not what we have from last season. The only reason we're doing this is because it's all we got. So taking a look at the tale of the tape for the 2020 teams, Minnesota Vikings last year finished 4th in total offense, 14th in passing offense, and 5th in total run offense. It was a very good offense last year, putting up lots of points. It was the defense, the injuries that ultimately led them down. The inexperience cost them game after game, and they lost to teams that honestly they probably shouldn't have. The Dallas Cowboys being one that is fresh in my mind for some reason. Maybe that's because the Cowboys opened things up on Thursday night with a loss to the Buccaneers. On defense, they finished 27th total in the league, 25th against the pass, 27th against the run. It was the worst defense ever coached by Mike Zimmer in the 8 years that he's been with the Vikings. He's had top 10 defense every year except for one, and that was in 2014, his first year as head coach of the Vikings. Every other year up until 2020, he had a top 10 defense, and the hope is that they return to that this year. On the other side of the chart here, we have the Cincinnati Bengals, who finished pretty close to last in almost every statistical category. 29th in total offense, 27th and 24th in pass run offense, respectively. Their total defense wasn't much better, 26th overall in the league. 19th against the pass, 29th against the run. A lot of similarities, realistically, between the Bengals and the Vikings last year. A lot of significant injuries to key players. The defense didn't perform very well, and it led to a lot of disappointment. Now, the inverse of that, of course, or the argument that these two teams aren't in the same category, is that there was expectations last year for the Minnesota Vikings. However misguided those might have been, there wasn't really any expectations for the Bengals last year. So for them to finish as poorly as they did wasn't really a disappointment. It was actually kind of expected. Maybe not this poorly expected, but it was at least expected that they weren't going to set the world on fire. Losing Joe Burrow for most of the year hurt them immensely, and after that it was the Ryan Finley show, if I remember correctly, who was their backup quarterback and maybe still is. So it's sort of a different dynamic, but ultimately very similar off seasons for these two teams as they try to rebuild their anemic defenses. The Bengals stealing one from the Vikings in free agency. They signed Trey Hendrickson. He'll be fresh on the defensive line for this team. Also, they got another defensive tackle, free agent Ogunjobi. I always have trouble pronouncing that name. One significant headline going into this weekend's matchup with the Bengals is the Bengals are going to be without Trey Waynes, former Minnesota Vikings cornerback. He is injured and will not play, so that is going to leave the duties up to Eli Apple and Chidobe Awuzie to cover Justin Jefferson and Adam Thielen. So if you have any of the Minnesota Vikings wide receivers on your fantasy teams, this is the week to play them because they are going to commit war crimes against the secondary that no longer has Trey Waynes available and no longer has Mackenzie Alexander because he has now returned to the Vikings after a one-year hiatus with the Cincinnati Bengals. Also, to be on the lookout for the Cincinnati Bengals, does JaMarr Chase have the yips? He has been criticized and front and center for most of the preseason for dropping a lot of passes. Now, we all may have heard his famous explanation over this past week that the NFL football, regulation football, doesn't have the white stripes on it like the one does in college. And that was also sort of a misquote. I forget the reporter that sort of brought this to light, but I think it was Kelsey or Kelly Conway that covers the Falcons. I'm sorry, I don't remember who tweeted it, but I specifically feel like it was her. That says that quote was taken a little bit out of context. JaMarr Chase, isn't directly attributing that feature or aspects to his drop passes this year. It's just something that he pointed out. So, but anyway, I digress. It'll be interesting to see if JaMarr Chase is the player that we all thought he was coming out of LSU, even though he opted out for the year. The key matchup for the Cincinnati Bengals and the Minnesota Vikings that I'm looking at is the Bengals wide receivers versus this revamped secondary. No longer do we have Jeff Gladney, Mike Hughes, and Cam Dantzler starting in the secondary at the corner spots. We're going to have Patrick Peterson, Bashaud Breeland, and Mackenzie Alexander going up against what I think is a very young and dynamic receiving core in Cincinnati with Tyler Boyd, JaMarr Chase, and T. Higgins. T. Higgins has really been the talk of the town. I have him on a couple fantasy teams. I'm really expecting big things out of T. Higgins this season after a pretty good rookie campaign last year where Joe Burrow was unavailable for most of it. So it'll be interesting to see how the Minnesota Vikings shut down the passing attack because I think that's really the test. That's really going to be the test because not only do we have a revamped defensive line that's going to exclusively shut down Joe Mixon, we have a revamped secondary that should be better than it was last year as this defense tries to return to top 10 dominance. For the Minnesota Vikings on the injury report, we are going to be without Christian Darrisaw and Anthony Barr officially, so that's going to leave us with one starting linebacker, which feels like, a merry-go-round curse, if you will, from last year when Anthony Barr was out after the second week of the regular season with a torn pec. This time it's a knee injury, so he will miss, I believe this is his 15th straight game where he will not play. Yeah, because if you carry the two, blah, 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 math. It'll be his 15th absence for the Minnesota Vikings in the regular season consecutively. So Eric Kendricks is running the show at the linebacker position by himself this weekend. Hopefully he is able to do a good enough job where the Cincinnati offense will not be exploiting Nick Vigil and whoever else is going to be named the starter in Anthony Barr's place. Christian Darrisaw being out is of significance because this means Rashad Hill does get the start at left tackle, which I think this was something it was a foregone conclusion because, as I've been saying for weeks and months, that Christian Darrisaw is probably going to miss the first 3 to 4 weeks of the season because even if he's healthy, he's missed all of practice, all of training camp. He is so far behind the 8 ball that he has a lot of catching up to do to be a good left tackle for this team, which is what they need. So Rashad Hill versus the pass rush of the Cincinnati Bengals is the other matchup I'm looking at. First and foremost, and finally, really, for the Minnesota Vikings for this weekend, number one, there is no more excuses. This is it. This is live action. The starters are going to play. The excuses and the disappointments that we had in the preseason/training camp are over and done with. We're not looking at that anymore. Did we overreact to that a little bit? Yeah, I think we did. But at the same time, the starters are out there. Let's see what you got. Prove it to us. And finally, play calling. That's going to be the other sort of storyline that we're going to be looking at. What kind of game plan does Clint Kubiak have in place, and how is he going to make adjustments against the Cincinnati Bengals in Week 1? Final words and thoughts for this matchup. Listen, the Cincinnati Bengals are not a good team. They haven't been good for a long time. I don't think that they have a very good coach. I do think that they have a good group of young core players on offense. The defense is a little suspect. Is this going to be the Riley Reiff revenge game, or is it going to be the Mackenzie Alexander, Mike Zimmer revenge game? Because remember, Mike Zimmer is originally from I believe originally from Cincinnati, or at least he coached with the Cincinnati Bengals as a defensive coordinator. So there's a lot of personal storylines going on here. Don't sleep on games that appear to be winnable on paper, or teams that we definitely should win. I expect Minnesota Vikings to walk away this Sunday from Cincinnati with the W, but honestly, currently this team is in a spot where I wouldn't be surprised either way. So all I'm saying is manage expectations. I do predict the Vikings will get the win this weekend, and I'm going to go with a final score of, I don't know, 24-16. Let's call it that. So that's going to do it for this game preview for the first weekend of NFL action for the Minnesota Vikings. Thank you for joining us. Join us tomorrow after the game is concluded for our post-game wrap-up video, where you can leave a comment for the next video that will come out on Monday. So thank you very much for watching. I'll see you in the next one.